I want to talk to you today about my final deliverable for HDG650, and it's a design project, so we'll be going through some design deliverables. But first of all, I wanted to just really talk a little bit about the background to where the research came from, and interestingly enough, the research came from the other unit that we were doing, which is HDA650, which was Research Methods for Design. So I'm going to quickly run through that document. Hopefully the camera will pan down to that document so that we can have a look at that. So I went and did a whole bunch of research with people in the organisation or in the bank around projects, and we were looking specifically at project deliverables and which ones worked and which ones didn't. But as we went through this process of research, we found a whole range of really interesting things. And one of the big things that came out of it was that depending on who you were in the organisation, you actually took the information from customer research and abstracted it differently. So designers tended to abstract the information from customer research a little bit less and then try and apply it and turn it into concrete stuff. Marketing people tended to take the customer research and then internalize it, so they could become the voice of the customer, and that way they could talk as a customer whenever they were in a meeting. And then business folk tended to take it and recombine it with a whole bunch of other data to build, I guess, stories in which they could sell the ideas to the business. So that was quite interesting. Look, what we wanted to do is really look at this experience model, which talks about the way I guess a project goes. So there's a bit of strategy where everyone's running in different directions. Then there's a bit of planning where we try and align everyone. And then there's the process of design where we take all these ideas and crunch them into a single thing. And then there's a process of design evaluation where I guess the ideas from the design process get evaluated by different people in the organisation, different stakeholders, and then we have to try and get alignment again. And then after that design evaluation, there's a bit of an implementation phase, and then once again it's been evaluated by people in the organisation. A little bit more attention there as well. And last of all, it gets handed off to the BAU folk. So this is a model for not only the process of producing a project within the bank, but also we can map different things against it. So we also developed a whole bunch of personas which represent different parts of the business. So this persona here is Jennifer, and she's from the business. This is Cameron, and he's in marketing. And this is Sarah, and she's a designer. She looks like a designer. And this is Duncan, and he's in development or technology. So we used those personas and looked a little bit at how much they were involved in the project in different phases. So for instance here, Jennifer's involved a lot in strategy and planning, only a tiny little bit in design, and then a little bit in design evaluation, implement, evaluate, and oversee. And so each of these different personas had different levels of involvement in the project at different times. And what we found was that where there were areas of no one was really responsible for the output, there was sort of tension. So as you can see in strategy and planning, there's always a big circle, but in some of these areas like design evaluation and evaluating the final design, there's a more equal distribution of, I guess, power or relationships. And we found that these instances were, or these sections were where there was a lot of tension in the project. So we also mapped, I guess, this idea of emotion, so whether the people were being positive or negative across this across this project plan or project experience, if that makes sense. So we mapped those out individually for each of the different personas. Probably the most interesting thing here is this emotional response mapped to the project involvement. So what we did was looked at the project involvement, remapped the customer or the persona's experience across that project, and what we found was, once again, that their emotions sort of dropped as they went into this design evaluation phase, which is probably not what you want. I mean, ultimately what we want to do is end up trying to build some sort of thing where hopefully we might have that line, or we might end up with a line that just sort of goes like this and goes off the chart. That's what we're really trying to build in a project experience. So on the basis of that, I've tried to come up with a design project, which is up here, that addresses those issues really. So once again, we have this model because it's important, and really we looked at different potential solutions, different ways of actually solving this problem. And the first one was, currently the customer sort of sits outside of the process, and in a future state maybe we want to have the customer talking to us and doing some collaborative design, etc., etc., and the customer actually being at the center of the design process. Now that's underway in the bank. It's just going to take a long time to happen. Alternatively, we could look at, at the moment we do a lot of testing at the end. Maybe we have more testing in the middle and involve the customer at both ends of the process. Alternatively, another way of doing or resolving this question is not to share our design research. So we could have, currently this is what we are, we have our design research and we give it to everyone in the organization. If we isolated that information, then these guys couldn't act on it, so therefore we wouldn't have as much argument about things. It's not necessarily a good thing. The other way of doing it is, I guess, knowledge sharing, and we're also working on this. Currently we all have slightly different views of the customer. What happens if we merged all that information together? And that could be done through, say, a dynamic persona or something like that. In the case of this design project, what we attempted to address was this idea of, if we have a single view of the customer and we all have different opinions of it, what would happen if we could try and converge those opinions together? So we all come up with a single view of what that customer research is about. And that's what this project's really about. So in order to do that, we've come up with this idea of having a system of artifacts, and one artifact in particular, one document in particular, which is a wrapper document. So this diagram basically expresses that there's a whole range of different design artifacts or artifacts that go with a project. So things like business objectives, marketing objectives, etc., etc. We wouldn't ever replace any of those, but what we're suggesting is that maybe there's a role for a document which encapsulates each of these different parts of the project process. So I might just, if you can imagine, this experience map sort of lies down here. It doesn't actually map one-to-one, but the idea is, up here in the strategy and planning and then design and evaluation of design, these things all sort of match up, and hopefully will once again, make the project process nice and happy. Now the reason why we're using this idea of a wrapper document is that we've identified a problem about internal and external states. And based on the readings in the course, things like Barnard and Tunstall in 2000 and 2008, there's this idea that if you can express what's internal, you might actually be able to get a shared common understanding of what's going on. So I guess I'm just going to read a little bit here, but by understanding how research information is being internalized and making it explicit, we can then see the different perspectives, which will then influence the perception and creation of the designed artifacts, and also the understanding of the participants involved in that creation process. So in order to solve that, we've proposed this wrapper design thing that we've been talking about.